streaming on. You're now live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining the meeting. Just a few introductory remarks as normal. Just so everybody is aware that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with the Council's remote meetings protocol and procedure rules. If anybody would like to make a comment, can you please raise your virtual hand? Can I please ask that everybody's microphone is muted when you are not speaking, and to encourage people to leave their camera on where possible. Any voting will be taken by general assent. And Joanna, can I ask that you can take a register of attendance from the list on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. So item number 1 is apologies or substitute members. I think we've had apologies from Keith Granger. Derek or Joanna, have we had any other apologies or substitutes?
Yes, another apology from Tim Griffith.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have a new member joining us. Trudy from College Town is replacing Kate Davis as the primary school representative. I don't know if Trudy's in the room. I have a feeling she might be in the Teams meeting, so we will welcome her if she comes through. Okay, on to item number 2, declarations of interest. Oh, sorry, Paul.
Do you want me to give her a quick text to let her know she's in the wrong meeting? I've got a number on my phone.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Will do.
Sorry, item 2 is declarations of interest. The only one that we have noted is a potential careless and Owlsmore around item 6, because item 8 regarding the high needs budget block. Can I ask members just to make us aware when we get to the item if they've got any declarations that need to be made, please? Paul, is there anybody else that you've spotted?
No, nothing obvious, Stuart.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 3 then is minutes and matters arising. I've only got one matter arising, which was on page 7, which was for Cheryl to give us an update on the progress with Kings with regard to the SRP, and I believe that is on the agenda, so we'll come back to that later in the meeting. Was everybody else happy to approve those minutes or got any questions on those minutes? It looks like some thumbs up. So Joanna, we can approve the minutes from the last meeting, please. Derek, item number 4 is about the forum's constitution and membership. I think we're coming to you for this one.
Yeah, I haven't actually got a lot to add to it. I think it hopefully speaks for itself. We've updated the membership, and have to be honest and say that Paul did all the calculations because it's way beyond me.
I won't make any comment about Paul's calculations. So I think that's as a result of there being more academies and a switch in pupil numbers, which means we've got to change the makeup. Paul, did you want to add anything?
I just yeah, I mean, one of the things we've also to note, I think, is that we'll only have one governor from maintained schools on the in the membership moving forward, and that is something that partly reflects the fact we've had real difficulty recruiting to those vacancies. We've been trying for a long time now. We've even in a position where we can't actually propose people for the executive director to nominate because it's been difficult to get someone to volunteer to it. So we've got a very good balance of head teacher representatives. So I think we take some comfort from that. But that's the only thing I would say, that we are possibly a bit light on governors with just one going forward. But I think it does reflect allowing us to maximise people actually attending the meeting, which I think is important as well. So that's all I'd say really. The rest of it, as Derek said, is quite self-explanatory and just reflects the balance of pupils in different school types now.
So sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with where it is. Will you take an action to pursue the governor vacancies? And I'm trying to look at the number. Is there how many additional?
No, I mean what we're saying is going forward is that there are, if we accept these proposals, there'll be 2 extra places for academy schools.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll be reducing from 3 to 1 the number of governor members in the LA sector, and that's going to be Roger. So that we have been able to fill those other 2 places for a long time through a lot of trying. And I think we reflected the other option would have been to take out one of the head teacher membership positions, and we thought that there is good attendance there, and I think it's best to maintain a good attendance. I think so. You know, that's the only thing I'd say. I don't know if anyone else has got any comments on that or any suggestions, but as I say, we've tried for a long while now to fill those governor posts and haven't succeeded.
Okay, I think I can't see any hands up about that. So do we have the right number of academy reps then, or are you asking us to find more?
Yeah, you've got 2 vacancies.
Okay, so that's
a process for the academy representatives to arrange 2 more places to come. Well, we'll confirm that after the meeting. If this gets approved, we'll confirm what needs to be done after the meeting, if that's all right, Stuart.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. So if we go to page 11, the recommendation is 2.1 that the revised Schools Forum constitution and membership be endorsed. Are we all happy with that? I'm seeing nods and thumbs up. So that has been agreed, and we'll pick that up after then, Paul. Looking at Liz for help on that. Joanna, sorry, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, it's just for the minutes, so I can do the who's here. I just need to know who iPhone is, please.
Okay, so somebody's just joined the meeting with camera off, and there's no name appeared other than iPhone. So somebody's just joined the meeting. Are you able to identify yourself?
It's Trudy Salmons from College
Brilliant.
Town. I couldn't get you on Zoom on my laptop, so I've had to do it on my phone, and I've got no idea how to work it, if I'm honest.
Well, we can hear you and we know who you are, and we have welcomed you, so we'll welcome you again. A warm welcome, Trudy. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, in that case, can we move on to item number 5, which is the childcare sufficiency assessment, a brief document from Cherry, I believe.
It is. Hello, everybody. So this is our annual childcare sufficiency assessment, which we bring to Forum for Forum to note before it gets published. The data is based on summer 2022 attendance and capacity, etc. And our plans haven't massively changed as per the report. However, I do think it's really important for me to make you all aware that the picture has significantly changed since this report was done. And I've only just made Cheryl aware of this yesterday, actually, because it's all very, very new. We have the potential that we are going to lose 2 early years settings at the end of the academic year, which could mean that we're losing 50 to 60 part-time places, and that's for 2, 3 and 4-year-olds. They are in different areas of the local authority, but it will have a significant impact. We're working with another 3 providers regarding their business model and hoping to support them to make changes to make them remain sustainable. It's a really, really difficult time for early years providers at the moment. There are a number of significant issues which is impacting on this. And I know that schools as well understand the recruitment and retention issues at the moment, but it's significant for the early years sector too. Lots of parts of that. Part of it is around the funding. We all know that early years is not brilliantly funding, and even with the increases that people are pleased with, it's still not meeting the needs of the outgoings. Therefore, they're not able to attract high quality staff. Therefore, lots of settings, or that they have capacity premises wise for additional children, but they can't take additional children because they haven't got the staff to do it. So it's a really, really difficult time. And I just felt it was, although we need to publish the report because it was accurate at the time, there are changes, and we are working really closely with these providers as soon as they come to us. There's also, as again, schools will be very aware, an increasing number of children with SEND needs, which is also impacting. That's certainly one of the questions that the DFE ask me every time we meet, sort of 6 weekly. Are you finding it difficult to find places for children with SEND? We are now in the situation where our Family Information Service, when they're doing brokerage, trying to look for childcare for families, we're not able to meet all of those requests at the moment. So I just think it's important to know. And I don't know if Sue has anything that she'd like to add to the picture, because she's in the market herself.
So I would agree with absolutely everything that Cherry has said. You know, we are a sector in absolute crisis, and I've been in this industry for 29 years now, and I've never been more worried about the future of my own 2 settings, and my colleagues that have been chatting to me about their concerns with the increasing costs. We're incredibly grateful for the extra funding that, you know, we do have coming, but it's just simply not enough. My view would be, within the next 3 to 5 years, I think Bracknell Forest will be lucky to have a private sector of early years. I don't know whether you agree with that, Cherry, because we are in a desperate situation. We cannot attract quality staff. Staff are coming and going very quickly, which obviously isn't cost effective with your recruitment costs. That's then eaten into other budgets, and it is just a consistent merry-go-round. And the biggest concern is, whilst all these things are going on, the outcomes for our children are potentially not what they could be.
Yeah, I think just to sort of add, it is a national issue. It's not just Bracknell Forest. I'm involved in some roundtable discussions at the moment with the Local Government Association on the future of early years in childcare. There's lots of conversations going on at the moment. But the last time we looked at the stats within Bracknell Forest, 2/3 of our early years was delivered by the private voluntary independent sector. And so it's, you know, how are we going to meet those needs? How are we as a local authority going to meet our sufficiency duty should we lose lots of settings? So sorry, it's a really negative picture, but I just think, you know, the report doesn't really reflect that, because when it was written, the situation wasn't quite as it is now. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions for me at all.
If anybody's got a question, just pop your hand up. My question for you, Cherry, is about how best Forum can support you, because I'm looking at the recommendation on page 15, and all we're asked to do is note, but underneath that it said there's statutory guidance for the local authority to secure sufficient childcare. To meet its duty, the Bracknell Forest is required to submit a report to elected council members and how it's meeting this duty. Is the suggestion that we're not going to be able to do that?
I mean, this is what we're not 100% sure of, Stuart, if I'm honest. I mean, when the report was written, we were confident that we had the places to meet the duty. With literally yesterday, I heard from another provider who is potentially going to close. And, you know, we've lost probably 50 to 100 childminders over the last few years. So it is significant. So I think we're looking at what needs to happen. There is a decline in child number, so there is that bit, but we are having more families taking up the 30 hours. So whereas before we were only looking at 15-hour places, now lots of families are taking up 30-hour places. So at the moment, I can't tell you whether we can meet it or not, because it's such a challenging market, if I'm honest. But there is the potential. So I think we're doing some more surveys with our providers to try and get some more up-to-date information, but it's an ongoing, and from the provider's point of view as well, you know, they haven't really got the time to answer our surveys, but unless we're getting the information from them, we can't it's very different to the school population where you've got a PAN. That's not the same in the private and voluntary sector. So I'm not sure what can be done at the moment, but I think I just wanted to make you aware, and we'll bring more information back to Forum as soon as we've got it.
Okay, I will come back to the recommendation in a minute. Liz, you had a hand up and down. Has that just addressed your question?
I was just going to register my shock. 50 to 100 places, that those poor children, those poor families, and the lifelong impact. So keep going, Cherry, keep on going, get that help in as soon as possible. That's massive.
Yeah, I mean, there's the potential. I'm meeting with the owners of the accommodation where one of the providers are next week to look and see if we can work together to engage with a new provider to go in there. But, you know, it's got to be a viable business. And at the moment, that's a struggle.
Roger, I think you waved a hand as well.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's very helpful. I'm just wondering, are the solutions money and recruiting staff, or are there other solutions, Cherry?
I think some of the work that we're doing, Roger, is we're working with another organisation on looking at the rent that they're charging, and we're looking at doing a sliding scale of rent because the provider wants to try and increase their hours. But, you know, it's a bit of a speculate to accumulate situation. So we're working with the owner of their building to say, can we give them a reduced rate until they build up numbers? So we're doing lots of different things. And lots of, so David, who does all the business in my team, is helping people with business models. We're trying to look at diversifying. So can people do before school, after school, holiday clubs? You know, we're looking with providers at all of those different opportunities. So yeah, there's lots of stuff going on. I think recruitment is the biggest difficulty, if I'm honest, but I think that's the same for schools and settings at the moment, and I don't think there's a quick fix to that, but that is part of the roundtable discussions that we're having with the LGA as well.
So that's great, and thank you very much for that. Do we need, I know we've got Gareth in the room, and if this is a national issue, is this something we want to ask Gareth to reflect to the MP or a wider scale? Because I think it's beyond our remit.
Can I say that at 3 levels, one through the Local Government Association, making representation. Secondly, there's been a big discussion about effectively the insufficient amount of support to allow providers to recruit good staff. It's very high on the agenda.
Okay, I think we got some of that.
But I'm absolutely happy to take this on board. Very best providers.
Gareth, unfortunately, you're cutting in and out.
And Ron, so it's big.
I'm assuming we've got Gareth.
Yeah.
We've got Gareth's support, and I think Gareth. Sorry, you were cutting out that you're going to raise it, and it has already been raised in several different areas. Are there any questions? It's a lengthy report. Has anybody got any questions or queries or cherries or anything other than that you wanted to highlight?
No, nothing else really to highlight. I mean, if anybody does want to go through any of it in further detail, I always find the maps quite useful when you're looking at your provision. You know, if any heads on the call or any of their colleagues want to have further conversations about it, then happy to engage with them outside of this meeting.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? In that case, we are on page 15, and the recommendation is that School Forum notes the attached report, and I think we can note that. Can we also, Joanna, note our concerns about the sustainability of the situation going forward? I'm not sure, Cherry, what else we can do for you other than note our concerns.
No, I don't think there is anything else, Stuart. I just felt it was important because, like I said, the report didn't reflect it, and I didn't want to come here present a report that is painting a relatively positive picture, and then next month saying something totally different, or parents concerned that they can't get the care they want. So it's just really for your information.
Okay.
And I will work with Cherry to take this up as formally as I can, Stuart.
Thank you very
I
much.
agree, it's a very difficult position.
Thank you, Gareth.
Okay, in that case, unless anybody disagrees, that the report is noted, and thank you very much. That must have been a huge amount of work to produce that document. So thank you very much, Cherry. Okay, can we move to item number 6, which is the special resource provision? And I think, Nathan, you're taking us through this.
Hi, thank you, Stuart. Firstly, my apologies, my camera has stopped working, so you don't get to see me this evening. So my apologies for that. IT are working on it, shall we say. So I shall give an update of secondary SRP development, also work within the primary sector, and an update on the banding work that I've been involved with. So there's three real strands regarding secondary SRP development. Firstly, the bringing online the 40 places at King's Academy Binfield. I know there was a point of clarification regarding capital investment. I can confirm that there will be no capital investment from the Send Capital funds. We've had a very positive meeting with the school. The split will be 26 places in secondary, 14 in primary. And the meeting we had yesterday really confirms that we are looking at those 40 places coming online in its entirety over the next 3 years. We have a second meeting with the head and the school next week, really to start to look at actual children and how we fit them into the school as they grow. There's a real commitment from the school. They've already reached out to our autism team to get up their knowledge base so they can meet the needs of children coming to them in September. Second element is around secondary ASC provision, or the commissioning of new secondary ASC provision. So there was an initial email out for schools to put some initial interest forward. 3 schools have done that. We've been out for visits. They range from sort of medium capital to significant capital spend to bring those places online. Given the level of spend that's required, that will need a more formal procurement process to bring those places to fruition. And the other aspect, the transition secondary SRP for cognition and learning out of Owlsmore, again, that's going to fall into the same category of requiring a formal procurement exercise given the size. I think critically, the local authority have now developed a capital strategy group that has a oversight of Send Capital. And as part of the work I've been involved in with Noreen Zarif, we have actually put a plan forward to that Send Capital group detailing all the activity that will be involved in bringing those places online over the next year. We're optimistic that we can make it happen for 2024. At least some places will be available within that timeline. But we'll continue working with our colleagues within the Capital Strategy Group to bring some pace to bring these to fruition. Would you like me to stop there, Stuart, for any questions on that section?
Okay, anybody got any comment? Yes, thank you, Nathan. Anybody got any comments on that SRP bit? I've got a couple of notes just to say thank you very much for the work on bringing those online. And I think it was noted in the last forum about getting the King's SRP, and it's great that that's moving forward positively, and you're working closely together. The other note I've got on that is you mentioned procurement, and I know, Nathan, you've been working really hard on this, but this meeting last year we were talking about SRP provision in school, and you used the word pace. And I think it's really important now that we bring these provisions online. We've done an awful lot of talking about it, and we need to see them actually happening, and schools need as much notice as possible to bring these online, and any pressure that can be brought onto that process, I would certainly encourage. I don't know what colleagues think. Liz.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing, that obviously we do need to work with as much haste as possible, because 2 years is a long time on it. So if there's anything we can do to help to speed the process.
And Cheryl, I think you're on the case as well. With I know it's difficult getting access to funds, but
could I come in there, please, Stuart?
Yes, please.
So colleagues on the call and wider, we are setting up a capital board for the People Directorate, and the funds that we have, the capital board, and Gráinne has confirmed this, we will require stakeholders across the community and from Schools Forum. And so part of the development of the SRPs and any investment, we would welcome the challenge from Schools Forum by having members on that board with us, working with us. We are looking to develop a short, a medium and a long-term plan, and how we can allocate that funding accordingly, and actually planning much further in the future. And as colleagues will appreciate, when you've got large sums of money, there are lots of considerations in there, and obviously it's public money and there's a lot of governance. So we have got a terms of reference to the board. We just need to set the date. We will be coming out to Schools Forum, but wider as well, because we want representation. And we will be working then to develop that plan. And then you can challenge from within, but then we can bring it back to Forum as well. So that's how we're moving forward. We are still in discussions with all these different institutions, and some fall into the short, some to the medium, and some will be long-term going forward. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Cheryl. Simon.
Yes. Sorry, Stuart, just adding to what you were saying about the pace, and just complimenting Nathan on his work that he's done. But we are, so just talking from a school that's obviously got a unit attached with children that are accessing mainstream at the moment. We've got one currently year 7 and 2 year 6s with, again, admissions have just come out with no schools to go to. So I just want to emphasise the importance of the pace, because we're now in a situation, we've got 3 young people, we literally know where to go. And last year, from what I believe from inheriting from over at Ellesmere, we've currently got a year 7 student in our primary unit because there was no place to meet their needs. So what I don't want to do is in July, we're going to be in the same situation where I've got 2 year 7s and a year 8 child in a primary unit.
Yes.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did I see Jenny, your hand pop up?
No, sorry, Stuart.
Okay. Cheryl, I'm not sure you can answer this question, and I'm not sure it's in School Forum's remit, but are we permitted to know how much funding there is for SEN Capital? I know we've got oversight of the high needs block.
There are a number of different pots of money, but we did a piece of work in 2022 to identify them and put them together, and it would appear there is approximately £4.8 million. But that is only for SEND, can only be used for capital build for SEND. And obviously there is quite a complex sign-off for those funds. So through the capital board, we will be putting forward projects, working together to identify the projects and where that money can be spent.
And thank you for sharing that. And I know we've had a conversation about it, but I think it's really important for Forum to know that that is a significant amount of money that could make a significant difference to SEN places and therefore students with additional needs across the borough. and I know it's repeating the point, but getting that capital money to have an impact on students as quick as possible has got to be an absolute priority, and anything you can do to I know decisions have got to be good and they've got to go through due process, but that's money that could be making a difference right now. So any work on that is hugely appreciated. And Gareth, I guess for you to pick that up as well as the executive member.
Absolutely, yeah, working with them. I mean, I think, first of all, identifying the money was a big bit of this, but would absolutely agree we need to get it on stream as soon as possible. But no, the progress with Kings has been very positive as well.
Okay, Nathan, I think that might be the first section of your report. So unless there's any other comments on that first bit, we'll hand back to Nathan. I can't see any hands, Nathan. So
lovely, Stuart. We'll move on to primary. So focusing on the primary SRP sector, I've been reviewing Meadow Vale Primary, their speech, language and communication unit. Numbers have been very low and it's been running at 20% occupancy. It isn't detailed in the paper, but since I wrote this paper, I have had a further conversation with the head teacher and they have decided to close that unit. So I'm working closely with the head to inform parents of that. I've already been talking to the SEND department, and we're planning the moving of the children that will be impacted by this closure. It's actually a very, very small cohort of children, I think 2 all in. Moving on, we'll talk about Harmon's Water. So Harmon's Water contacted me in November. They were in crisis. They'd lost their lead teacher. They voiced that this was directly down to just the level of challenge that their teacher was having to deal with on a daily basis. And her departure was closely followed by 2 key members of staff as well. We've put a really robust support package in place for Harmon's Water. We're meeting regularly, and this is very much an approach from Bracknell rather than just me. So I'm working with Zoe, head of school improvement, Jane Pepper, behavioural support manager, and the SEND department as well. The key is securing 2 places for 2 children that it's felt were inappropriately placed at that provision, but it's proving quite challenging to find appropriate places. I think they've now consulted with maybe 15 to 20 schools. That support is ongoing. I have a meeting with the school diarised in mid-March. And they've brought in a consultant to support them to review their provision and make some clear plans for the future. For me, critically, it's developing a mutually understood entry criteria that the school understands the nature and needs of children that will come to them, and also the local authority understands the nature and needs of children that they would be placing with them. Moving on, we've had some discussions with Simon from Owlsmoor Primary. He's really identified he has 2 distinct cohorts of children, a cohort of children that with high levels of support are able to access a mainstream curriculum, but another cohort of children, due to the complexity of their cognition and learning needs, really would struggle even with high levels of support to access that mainstream curriculum. So he has proposed, and we are supporting the development of a discrete 8-place unit for his most complex cohort of young people, and an SRP provision for his, when I say more able, I guess that's always a matter of perspective, but his more able students currently accessing Kingfisher at Owlsmoor. I know Simon's very, very keen to get the nod, and I'm in the final stages of getting agreement. So I hope to be able to communicate to Simon that we're ready to go, hopefully tomorrow, but if not early next week. It's been through some legal process, and that's been all signed off. So I hope to be letting Simon know as soon as possible the go ahead from that. Any questions on primary element of my paper?
Paul, you've got your hand up.
Yes, just a question about the Meadow Vale speech and language resource closing. Is there likely to be a staffing, any redundancies linked to that? Any staffing impact that I should be aware of or might need to be aware of?
I mean, I haven't had that discussion yet with the head. I think there is potential, Paul, but it is only 4 children in scope. So 2 of those children will remain at Meadow Vale. So I think it's unlikely that there will be any significant impact. But I have further meetings with Catherine Forrester, the head, and I will just ensure that, you know, I'm cited if that's a likely outcome for the school.
Thank you.
Any other hands on the primary section? Okay, keep going, Nathan.
Right, on to the banding tool. So there's been some activity regarding the implementation of the new banding tool. So we had an event back at the end of 2022, 13 settings attended, and they moderated a number of children through the banding tool. Sort of a mixed bag came out of the other side of that work. Some schools were putting in £40,000 worth of funding for children that were currently in receipt of around 7,000. I suspect that's more of an administrative situation and lack of familiarity with the tool. As you will see within the paper, there are some workings and sort of initial findings of the impact. So for one school, it illustrated an increase of in excess of 200,000. And for other schools, it illustrated a reduction of funding of just under 90K's worth of funding. So we're now on the moderation stage. So I'm working to moderate a significant proportion of these cases, just so that we develop a further baseline. I think we have to be realistic. The high need block is under significant pressure, you know, current modelling suggests it could cost an additional 2 million. But I think the figures that we hold currently are pretty raw, and it's really very much a starter for 10 to probably generate a sharp intake of breath, certainly from my finance colleagues. But this is the first piece of work, and we will be doing some more moderation. We do accept that there will be situations where there is more funding going into mainstream settings, but that's very much on the view that that will retain those places in mainstream. So yes, on the surface of it, it might look like there is more money, but actually, when you look at the full envelope, there will be actually a reduction in costs. We know that keeping children in mainstream schools is the right answer if it's right for those children due to pressure on high need block. Another piece of work that we're just about to embark on is that we are planning, we're running a pilot project where we'll be running new EHCPs through the banding tool. And this is really just a kind of starting position, because what we found is that there's such disparity across the landscape at the moment with the current model, with some schools asking for in excess of 30,000 for a child on the provision map process, and other schools asking for no funding through the provision map process. So it doesn't feel like there's equity across the system. I think that ultimately, irrespective of whether we have a banding tool or we continue with a provision map, and I'm not suggesting we do, but actually it's about the guidance and the support and the suite of documentations that ensure that consistency and transparency across the system. So I have shared some documentation with colleagues in the high needs working group, and I've already started the process. Hertfordshire have a really well-developed tool that will support that transparency, and I've started some discussions within the local authority already as to how we develop that tool. So that's kind of where we are as far as the banding tool implementation, and I'll just open up to any questions following my update.
Jenny, I don't know if you want to make any comments, because the forum subcommittee has been working with Nathan on this. Have you got anything you want to add?
Not at the moment, Stuart. I think Nathan summed up everything that we've been looking at. Obviously, we are still looking for additional sample schools if we can.
Okay.
Sorry, just to come in with a further point. Absolutely, you're right, Jenny. What I certainly picked up was that the sampler that we took was very primary heavy and very communication and interaction, autism heavy. I know that Liz and Stuart have taken that on board, and they're twisting arms and calling in favours, so we can get as broad a sample as we can to make it as meaningful as we possibly can once Paul and I sit down and we start to really work through those numbers. Grant?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the report, Nathan. So there's a couple of things I just wanted to. So first of all, I mean, obviously to be welcomed in some ways that schools may receive additional extra £2 million funding from the high needs block, because blimmin' hell, we could really use it. But I didn't really hear that that's something that you see as ideal. And in fact, interestingly, some local authorities that I have experience of from the MAT I work for, where this model is used, it actually has a depressing effect on funding rather than, and it actually starts to be a very blunt instrument. And then the more I've been exposed to it in sort of near Bristol and in Sutton and some other places, I've become increasingly worried that actually what happens is that funding is given because a child falls on a matrix somewhere and actually stops reflecting the actual needs of the child. And I think I've just want to feel reassured at some point there's going to be some actually realistic mechanism that there can be challenge and can be discussion about whether actually schools will be a suitable placement if funding is isn't based upon the EHCP and what's being requested in it, but instead on a sort of an exercise of plotting a child on a matrix. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so the second point is I'm very concerned about when this is going to actually be enacted, because I do accept that the current situation isn't ideal for various reasons, but what we have at the moment is a limbo where actually we are being really poorly served with the high needs block, where we are getting funding settlements that seem to be completely at odds with the provision maps that are going in, or indeed the HCPs. And in fact, we could talk also about the fact that we're not actually receiving any of the money. So I guess my questions are, is when is this actually going to be in place, and what assurances do we have that we're either not going to go wildly over the top where suddenly schools, £2 million and we're going to be even more overspent, or we go completely the other way, which is it becomes an entirely blunt instrument that doesn't reflect actual children's needs, which will of course upset parents, and we'll just be back in the same position we've always been in.
Sure, absolutely, Grant. I totally agree with you. My thinking is that, I think we have to model this much more effectively than we have done. And, based on the data that I've got at the moment, I thought it was just helpful just to illustrate the impact and what that could be, but this is not our final resting position. For me, I think the critical part will be about how that funding is allocated. And I'm not advocating a system that is just a local authority driven model. Again, I've reviewed a number of models, and I would like it to be done between the school and the parent as an initial first process, and also done within the local authority. But also I wish to ensure that there is a really robust and commonly accepted way of schools challenging the banding allocation. Because I think that that's important, and that's about the transparency of the system. My view is that I think we have to be careful that either this doesn't take out substantial levels of funds within the system to create an even more challenging time for our mainstream schools, but nor can it be about giving substantial amounts of additional funding when needs aren't illustrating that level of support that's required. So I think it's a fine line that we tread, and I think it always is when you implement a new tool. I think that the time of implementation, I think with that still to be decided about what sort of impact that this has on the system as we move to a new approach. I think we're probably going to staircase it in over a number of years, but I do worry that that may create some inequitable situations within the system as well. So I think that from my perspective, it's about an ongoing conversation with Schools Forum and colleagues within the high needs subgroup as to what sort of pace that we do without it having significant impact on either schools, on the statutory assessment team as we manage that high volume of shift from one funding mechanism to another, but also at a pace that doesn't bake in some inequalities within the system as well. So it's going to be very much a partnership, Grant.
Grant, I think a couple of those issues were raised by the subgroup as well. The only other point that I think is worth noting is about the capacity to move EHCPs over to that new system when there's already stress within the SEN team, and just to make sure that officers are cited that if and when that's finally agreed, it is a significant workload on top of everything else that's going on. So Grant, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. I mean, what I didn't hear though was a date, and I get that, and I realise you've got to model it, it's got to get it right. But in the meantime, I don't know if I'm the only person in this call who thinks that the current administration of the high needs block is working, but I am really concerned about what's happening at the moment. And I think there's that sort of, in the meantime, I think we need some assurances that there are some things going to be fixed. So I have raised with the SEN department, and so have colleagues at Crown Wood, some questions around the current funding model and some of the assumptions that are being made. So for example, when funding is based around TA hours, it's going to be based around a sum of money that's actually what's paid to the TA, but doesn't actually include the cost to the school. It's based on 38 weeks when a full-time TA is paid 43.1 weeks. And all of this adds in and eats into the 6,000, and this is on top of the £6,000 that we have to find from our budget already. So actually what we're actually doing is paying another £1,700 from our budgets. So I do think while we're waiting for this, there is some work to be done on the existing thing. And I think we do need a timeline, and I think we need to get some real idea about when this is going to be enacted so that the current situation can be improved. And the second thing is about implementation, which is about looking at some of those wild numbers in that admittedly small sample. It does need some thought about not having schools on a cliff edge of funding that suddenly find themselves £87,000, £90,000 short in a high needs block, and then are faced looking at making people redundant or being unable to put the provision in place that the children had previously. So I do think you're right about staircasing, and I do think you're right about implementation, but I just feel that it just feels a really long way off. So I'll be quiet now, but thank you for listening.
I mean, I think it's a very interesting position we're in, of course, isn't it? Because, you know, there was the update from central government about the green paper, and there is still the banding, a national banding tool within that. So, you know, I think that it would be helpful if central government fleshed that out a little bit more to give us a bit more clarity on timeline and actually what that's going to look like in reality, because we could invest a huge amount of time over the next 2 years. And actually, as soon as the dust settles, we have a national banding tool to implement. That's not to say we shouldn't do what we're doing, Grant. So I just want to give you some assurances of that. But that's a kind of risk as far as I'm concerned.
Grant, can I ask that we come back to your first point there when we get to item number 8 about approving the high needs block, because yeah, I think if there's elements missing or funding not being calculated, I think that's relevant to item 8, if that's okay. Nathan, I don't know if you're staying any further, so I don't know, Cheryl, if you wanted to say anything about free school while we've got Nathan with us.
Yes, happy to do so. I just wanted to follow up that I did receive Grant's email, and it has been put forward and considered, Grant, and I think it's very valid where you're saying that you have to pay for teaching assistants for a number of weeks in school holiday. Therefore, the fees that have been agreed have never taken those into account. That has been noted, and it is being followed up. So I can reassure you on that, and it hasn't been overlooked. So, but thank you for raising it again. So going on to free school, colleagues, as you're aware, I'm thinking September, October, we submitted an application for 2 free schools based on our data projections. And one was for an ASD school, which was our #1 priority, 100 places. And the second application was for an SEMH school of 70 places. Our biggest need in Bracknell Forest, looking ahead, is ASD. So both applications were well received by the DFE, and we had a lot of compliments about the quality, and to the point where both of them were well regarded. However, the DFE did say that they were looking at applications from our neighbouring LAs, and as Stuart has referenced a number of times, what are we doing to work with our neighbouring local authorities? How are we joining up the pieces of work? So we did have initial conversations with them, because Windsor and Wokingham also put in applications for different types of schools. 152 authorities put in applications, only 33 schools were agreed. Our ASD school was agreed, and we're delighted with that. Wokingham and Windsor and Surrey have been agreed to have an SEMH school each. They are right on our borders. And the DFE did explain that they were looking about the East Berkshire picture across a larger area. So we will be going forward and working with our neighbouring authorities to access places for our young people at those SEMH schools. But in the meantime, we're really pleased about the ASD provision. We are the only ones in this area that have been successful with the ASD application. And we are now at that position where we're going to start progressing it. There's a lot of stages yet before we dig that first turf up, but members have been very, very supportive. Gareth has been a great champion for us. The MP, James Sunderland, has been a great supporter, and you yourselves have been great supporters. And all of that has made the difference. And the DFE were very complimentary. So we're looking forward to delivering that. And the timeline, as it's a complete build, there's quite a few things to be done within the next 12 months. We have to agree that we will be able to dig the foundations by 2025. We're fairly confident we can do that. And in fact, if we can, we would want to start it before then, but we will need to work with their design teams. And prior to that, we will also be engaging in a national competition for a sponsor. So there will be a presumption competition, which will be advertised across the country. We will welcome applications from trusts, as it's a free school, who can meet that criteria and our remit, and that can deliver what we require for our children in Bracknell. So a lot of things to go forward yet, but we're absolutely delighted. And I don't know if Gareth just wanted to come in there because he was very supportive in all this process.
I'm not sure that
maybe he's dropped out. Maybe he's dropped out.
I think, Cheryl,
yes,
we would say
you.
Forum has pushed and wanted extra places and capacity. So I think it's good news that those places are.
Yeah, I can confirm that it's really good. I'm online, but just to say, I think I absolutely agree with Cheryl. We want to progress this as quickly as possible. And I think there's quite a lot that came out as well of in the Green Paper update about why working with neighbouring authorities explain why we weren't successful on our own, next door and working together. So yeah, it's a great outcome, everyone.
Yeah.
So thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, well done. And I think if Martin were here, he'd be delighted to hear that extra capacity is coming through. I also just wanted to thank Nathan, because I think Nathan pulled those bids together in short time, supported by colleagues, I'm sure. But thank you, and well done to Nathan as well.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yes, thank you, Nathan.
Okay, in that case, unless there's no more any more questions, if we go to page 81, the recommendation is for us to be cited on the work that Nathan has been doing, and I think we are duly cited. In which case, can we move to item 7? Cheryl, I think this is you delivering better value update.
Unmute. Thank you, Stuart. I'll be brief because I have already given an update. We were successful in our bid to the DFE, and we have been awarded £1 million for the 3 projects that I outlined previously to Forum. So the 3 projects are transition for years 6 to 7 for children with ASD, putting in place a HLTA for each of our secondary schools to work with the young people and the families in year 6, so they transition successfully into year 7. The second one is providing ASD training, resources and support from the in-house ASD team across the whole of Bracknell for primary and secondary schools, with funding to release staff to attend that training. And the third work stream was Kennel Lane, providing outreach support and a piece of work, working with young people again and with our secondary schools to improve provision, curriculum, the skills and the delivery methodology needed, but also as a train the trainer piece of work, so that can go forward in the future. All 3 were successful. We've been awarded the £1 million, and certain parts of each work stream has already started. And I will make sure that you've got the papers, but I will make sure that we will give regular updates on that. And that will also support our young people with ASD in mainstream schools and help them to stay in mainstream schools with the right support and provision.
Okay, I've also got a note just to say thank you very much to officers involved in that programme. It was a rapid turnaround and a significant piece of work, and a large sum of money attached. So thank you very much to everybody involved in that. Are there any questions on delivering better value? Okay, thank you very much. Item number 8. Paul, is this you? High needs block.
Yes, Stuart, thank you very much. So yeah, I'll be brief as well. But I'm in anticipation of a lot of questions about the way this meeting's going tonight. So leave a lot of time for that at the end. Yes, so this is the final stage of a number of papers that have been brought to you about setting out proposals for next year's budget. There's not a huge amount of change from previous versions. We've had a bit of updates on data, particularly around the SRPs with the work that Nathan's been doing with the host schools there. So that's been refined to some extent. The overall bottom line package isn't looking any and it isn't looking significantly different than the medium-term financial plan we presented in January. As I say, there's just been some tweaks here and there. Nothing new's been added, just some updates. So this paper in itself is seeking two different parts of recommendations. So the first one is to see your views on the proposals for the budget next year. So how much money goes against each particular line of the services, and the actual final decision on setting the budget is with the executive member. But the executive member will be very interested in the comments and the recommendations made at the schools forum tonight. So it's important in that perspective. And the second area of the recommendations is a requirement that the DfE place on local authorities when their high needs budgets are being constructed, to seek approval that there are appropriate arrangements in place for children with SEND, and those in PRUs and alternative provision other than at school. So there's two parts to this, and that's pretty similar to what we've had in previous years as well. As I said, there's not a big change from last time, so I don't think there's anything I'd really want to add to the paper. Really, it's a very similar structure from before. I think you've had it. I know you will have read the paper, you'd be familiar with all the items within it, so I don't think there's any need for me to go through anything else in any detail unless anyone has any points of clarification. I don't know if you had any questions.
Got a list for you, Paul. Can we just go back and make sure we've got Grant's point noted, particularly around the missing funding for some schools, and I know you've done some work on that, Paul, and then the second point around adequately funding the real costs of LSAs while we're still using provision maps. Are both of those factors included in this budget?
Well, the budget includes a significant amount of growth for additional payments to mainstream schools for top-up payments. There's over £500,000 in these proposals. Part of that's reflecting demographic growth. Part of that is reflecting inflationary pressures. It's very difficult to say exactly how much those inflationary pressures will be and where they will fall, and how many additional plans will come through, but there are assumptions set out in the paper of how we've gone about that. So it's looking at recent trends, but expecting the rate of growth to reduce. In terms of the actual, so that's the numbers in the system, so that will pick up some of those that are missing, that haven't gone through the system yet. In terms of inflation, yeah, there was a pay offer came out at the very end of last month from the employers for the local government staff, which is the biggest cost driver in supporting children on plans. That came out after this paper was written. So the paper is proposing a 5.2% add-on for inflation. The pay offer from local government is for roughly a 9.4% increase for the lower paid local government staff, which is most of what these staff will be, and then the higher paid, which won't to a great extent impact on the cost of provision. It's a 3.88% offer. That's been rejected. So we don't know where, obviously we don't know where that's going, but it's fair to say that the offer is likely to be the minimum amount of increase that's going to come through at some point in time. So yeah, the payoff, the inflation provision is lower than the pay offer. And as I said, there was nothing that we didn't know about that at the time. So yeah, there's going to be a pressure in the funding in this paper. And you look in the paper anyway, there's a £7.4 million in deficit for next year. So funding any more inflationary increase would be a very, very high challenge anyway.
But some of that pressure will fall on schools, won't it? Because we'll get the 5% uplift, but schools have got to cover the full cost of those learning support assistants, which is coming out at 9%, and therefore the funding shortfall. I know there's a deficit on the high needs block, but a chunk of that pressure is going to fall on schools.
Yes, that's fair comment from the way that the paper was put together when we had the information at that time.
And there's nothing that can be done about that.
Well, there's the council's approved a budget of up to the level that we've presented tonight. It's an overspend, so obviously that money's, that money isn't in place from the government to make those payments. So it's something that's going to end up sitting in our balance sheet for the next, for the next 3 years. The DfE are saying that they're going to take care of that liability, but at the end of those 3 years, so March 2026, any deficit may fall onto the local authority to finance, and our current projections are it's £43 million. So that's obviously a huge concern, and this is an issue across the country. We're aware that other local authorities have already announced their funding increases for top-ups for their schools, and we know that Windsor and Maidenhead is lower than the 5.2% that we put in this paper, and I think Reading was as well. So we've had a couple through. I haven't seen the details myself. Someone's just told me that they're lower than our rates, but they've already been issued and announced. So those schools are unfortunately are in a similar situation.
Okay, but perhaps we'll come back when we get to the recommendations and we can add some comments there. I've got a few questions, but if people want to put their hand up if you get bored of my questions. Okay, I'm going to carry on being boring. I don't know whether it's specifically identified in the budget, but the PRU, we understand, is running a deficit and may run a deficit next year. Is that reflected in these costs, and has there been a adequate settlement for the PRU for next year?
Well, we're aware of we're anticipating a deficit in the current financial year 22-23, and that's built into the forecasts that are set out in the table that shows the rolling deficit for 22-23. So we have included a sum of around £300,000 as a deficit for College Hall in 22-23. Those accounts aren't closed yet, so we don't know exactly what that figure will be. We've had some recent discussions with the management committee on Monday, so we're exploring what they're presenting now. They're also putting forward some proposals for next year, which obviously we need some time to reflect on. But the budget proposals for 23-24 do include a provision of £250,000 for extra pressures that may emerge in education otherwise than at school. Okay, so that could well be the PRU, it could be home tuition, it could be elsewhere. These are very volatile budgets. So as the report sets out, where the final cost actually occurs in the budget is not always known, but we do recognise that there's likely to be some pressure in that area. We haven't got an accurate quantification for it because we're still going through that process, but it is reflected in the budget. The question is always the case, is it reflected at the right value? And we won't know that until later on.
Okay, but there is an allocation. There is an allocation. For
the education out of school budget. Yeah, whether that is actually College Hall or not, that's still to be decided. But yeah, it looks like there could well be a pressure there.
Sorry, Paul, you might already have answered this as I was reading something. There was a number of schools, I think, that you were collating some information on that had outstanding payments.
Yeah. A number of schools. I think there's a high number of schools, I think, is the answer to that. Yeah. Yeah, so we have actually, we're in the process of finalising a register of all the queries that are outstanding from schools. So we've had a very good response rate from schools. Schools have very well engaged with this as well. I think they recognise it's going to hopefully it's going to get to a position where we can actually sign all these things off and resolve them. So yeah, we've had responses from 32 schools. So there's 6 schools that we haven't had a response. I said today at the bursar support session, there's a bursar support session this morning that if we don't get anything by the end of tomorrow, that's it. We're closing the list then, and we're working through that. We've gone through some of those already. Just like to comment that there's good news on the staffing front in the SEN team that deals with these sort of queries, so the sort of the business support side of it. So Tara, who's the manager of that team, she's back full-time working now. There's been an extra post appointment into that team as well for a temporary 1-year basis, and that's a person that's worked for the council before in a different department. It's very, very good. So I've got a high level of confidence that she will help that process as well. I know it's a high priority in the SEN team as well to deal with these queries. They've got a whole day meeting as a group tomorrow to look at these. So we are expecting some progress. I'll just have to sort of temper how quickly we can go through all of these, because at the moment we've got a couple of hundred comments from schools about, well, where are we on this? So there's a lot to go through. A small number were corrected on the February reports that just came out to schools. There's quite small. There's a higher number that will be on the March reports, but that should deal with probably 15 to 20% of those queries that we've got right now. And then I expect that to ramp up quite quickly going into the new year. But we are going to keep that register going. We're going to send a monthly update out to school so you can see exactly where we are on the queries that you've raised. But undoubtedly, it's going to take a bit of time to go. But we have, I think we've got a mechanism now to follow these through. And the other point is if there are any other queries that come after this register set up, then obviously they just need to be raised in the normal manner as well to the SEN team. Okay. So I mean that seems to have got off to a good start. We just got to keep pushing on with us. It's confident that we will get some good progress on that.
Well, yeah, thank you for your work and for working your way through that. Our colleagues happy with that? I know we had a few emails through. Liz.
It wasn't about the late payments, but I'm sure it's welcome news to lots of us. It was linking back to the PRU. We've just heard that there's £4.8 million sitting there. Is there a way to link the two things together? I mean, that's obviously what this procurement group's about, but it just seems if the PRU needs some work.
I mean, the £4.8 million is capital money, so it won't be able to help to address the structural, if there's a structural deficit in terms of day-to-day running costs, in terms of staffing and that sort of stuff. But it's available to support SEND places, so it's a case of whether there's an identification that could help in any way. That would go through the Capital Strategy Board, I think that Cheryl was talking about. So I don't know if there's anything, Cheryl, you want to add there.
Oh, I am sorry. I was just checking my mic. No, not at this point. I think that's where we are. But happy to take any further queries or anything offline if people want to contact us with individual queries. Happy to do that.
I think it might be worth noting that I agree, Paul, capital money can't be used to support that structural deficit, but there may be needs at that PRU for capital investment as well as the annual funding. And I think, Cheryl, you were aware of that, so maybe one for the Capital Board.
I mean,
okay.
Stuart, long term, and I know Gareth agrees with me, I think we do need to review the site and provision of the building for College Hall. And I think everyone's in agreement on that. And we will take it to the Capital Board and see where we can progress that in the future. Thank you.
Okay, we have some quite significant recommendations and perhaps some challenges on these recommendations. But before we move to that, are there any other questions for Paul on the content of the report? I think we've raised everything that colleagues had sent through as well. In that case, can we go to page 100? And I just want to remind forum members perhaps where we were last year. So the first one, 3.1, is about making a recommendation to the executive member on the finances that have been presented. And I think that it may be worth forum adding a note to this about our concern regarding the level of the deficit, and particularly as we now know that deficit will fall on the local authority, and therefore any associated risks with what is a huge predicted cumulative deficit and any potential impacts that it might have when it becomes owned, if you like, by the local authority. Paul, is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a very good summary of that, Stuart. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge amount of money. It does come with significant risks, and how do we manage that when it, which I'm sure it will at some point fall onto the local authority. So for new members, this is always a difficult one for us because the responsibility falls on Gareth, but we're agreeing to it. So I think we have to agree to the budget as it has been presented. That's the information that we've been given, but we do know our concern about
the extent of that deficit and the potential impact that might have in the future. Are we all happy for Joanna to cobble something together from what I've said there? Or would anybody else like to say anything on 3.1? Okay, so the forum has agreed to 3.1 with the associated caveat. 3.2. 3.2 is about recommending that there are appropriate arrangements in place in two different areas. So first of all, for the education of pupils with SEN, and then secondly, for the use of pupil referral units. And this time last year, the forum did not support those statements, either that it was appropriate for SEN or pupil referral units. Would anybody like to make any comments about their views for the decision this year? Okay, good. Go on, Roger.
I just don't think, from the experience in particular of my school in my involvement with it on that, I don't think that there are appropriate arrangements yet in place for the education of pupils with SEN.
Okay, Debbie.
I agree. I don't think we're in a position to be able to say that there are appropriate arrangements in place for either SEN or referral units.
Okay, and last year I think we made the comment that was on the basis of too many students not being able to access local provision, and I would support that view. I would add, given what we've heard today and given the work that is going on, that it may be appropriate to say that the arrangements are not yet in place, and that perhaps we are now starting to see green shoots and some positive movements for the future, but at the moment they're not yet in place. Do forum members agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
Cheryl, I don't want to undermine the great work that's been going on and the positive news that we're hearing today and the direction that we're going, but I guess until those places are online, I don't think we can agree to it. Are you comfortable with that statement?
Yeah. Sorry, Gareth, you go ahead.
Yeah, can I come in? I think that's an entirely fair assessment of the current situation on all counts, and I fully take on board the comments made. And I think, Stuart, it's great to reference the progress being made, but ultimately, if we focus on outcomes, we're not there yet. But no, I think that wording is entirely appropriate, and totally agree with it.
Thank you, Gareth. Cheryl?
I would agree with Gareth's comments. I think we have to be realistic and transparent. We have done significant work and we are starting to see movement. There's still significant work to do. So I would welcome the fact that you've recognised that and that you and colleagues can see green shoots. I think that's a fair assessment. Thank you.
Okay, so for 3.2.1, the forum does not believe appropriate arrangements are in place for the education of pupils with SEN yet, but we do note positive progress in the right direction. What about 3.2.2? So this is specifically the PRU. Any comments? Okay, I'm not sure that the arrangements for the PRU are appropriate either. Those of us that use the PRU, it's a service which is difficult to access at the moment and is probably not functioning as we all might wish. And again, I think there's considerable work being done and plans being brought forward. But as we are today, I'm not sure that the arrangements at the PRU are appropriate either. It's just my view. I'm happy for others to comment. Debbie?
So I agree, and that's what I said earlier. There's two things in that point too, though, and the education of children otherwise than at school. I don't know if I'm in a position to comment on that in the same way. I certainly don't feel that the use of the pupil referral units is the arrangements are appropriate, but I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, I've missed that. So let's do that first bit of that. Are we all in agreement that we're not yet there with appropriate arrangements for the PRU? I can see nods, and yeah, I'm not well cited on that education of children otherwise than at school. I don't know if anybody else has got any input there to help us. Cheryl, maybe some clarification around what that might be.
That would be EOTAS, children educated other than at school.
Okay.
So it'd be an alternative provision, and there are a number of alternative providers outside of schools. The PRU would come in as one of those, but there are a number of children who have been placed in alternative provision.
Okay, so if it's a statement as a whole, and Paul, I'm probably looking at you for that. If we've got an issue with element one of that, I think we're probably saying the appropriate arrangements are not yet in place. Is that fair if it's the PRU we're commenting on?
Yeah, you can make your comment. You can split your comment into two if you prefer to do it that way. If the comment isn't appropriate for both sides there, you need to split it into two, definitely. Okay,
Debbie, is that still a new hand?
It is a new hand. So is it asking us about alternative provision? Because I don't know that does education of children otherwise than at school just cover that?
It also covers home tuition.
That's what what I was thinking.
Okay.
So I wonder if there's if kind of conflating things, if there's things together that maybe it's difficult to comment on.
Yeah, obviously this is the wording that the DfE have in their regulations, so it might not be exactly how it is in all different local authorities, but that's what we're asked to get a comment back on the schools forum each year.
So then I would say that there are not appropriate arrangements in place then if it has to stay as one yet.
Well, I think you can break it down, the comment between the PRU and other education other than at school, if that makes sense, if you want to, if you have a different view on those two.
I don't have much of a view of home tuition, and some of us might not. I suppose it depends what we've accessed and what we're trying to access. But other alternative provision in there, then there will be some views, and I'm not sure. So I think if it has to be that statement, then I think the answer for me is there are not appropriate arrangements yet. Similar comment to SEN, I'm guessing. The SEN one, I'm guessing.
Okay, I'm not adequately cited on the second half of that comment, that question, to feel like I can comment appropriately. I don't know if other forum members have experience of that. I'm seeing heads shaking. Paul, what do you need us to do there then?
It's a case, yeah, we just need you to, well, we're asking you to qualify, either agree that the appropriate arrangements are in place or confirm that there aren't. It would be helpful to add something as to why you don't think they're appropriate, I think. But the first comment you made, I think, is quite was quite a good one for that area. If you're saying it's similar for this one, you can repeat that comment. There's nothing wrong with that. Or you might want to make something different. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a long comment. Obviously we just need to know whether whether you do think they're appropriate or not, and if you want to sort of, as I say, put a bit of a qualification behind that or not.
So I think with 3.2.1 we're done. I think 3.2.2 with regard to pupil referral units, I think the access and the provision at the PRU is not yet appropriate. I don't know how to handle the second bit of that yet. So what I'm going to suggest is, given that colleagues are in a similar position, that if you'll allow Paul and I to look at some wording after the meeting for that last section, if you're happy to delegate that to me, then I can have that discussion with Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing nods. Joanna, have you got enough to minute that? So it's not yet
Yeah.
and not yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Are we there? Is there any other business?
There's also 3.3 to note.
Oh God, sorry, Joanna. 3.3. Yes, so the forum notes the financial position, which is what Paul's discussed. I think we're happy to note that. Okay, thank you, Joanna. Any other business? In that case, thank you very much. Loads of detailed reports and hard work that have gone into that. So thank you very much to the officers here for presenting us with such a significant amount of information. Thank you very much to forum members. I think we are closed. I'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.